She was far more forceful than either of the children, causing the kindly guard to take a step back. Why yes, there's a big pine tree just nearby. May I go and harvest more of them? If you promise not to leave my side, then perfect. Maomao leaped down from the wagon and Xiaohong followed. They picked up every pine cone they could find. They had been at it for about half an hour, and a small pile of pine cones had formed near Maomao. She didn't care about the pine cones themselves, but she was very interested in the nuts inside them. Pine nuts, called heisongzi or songzi ren in herbal medicine, were very high in nutrients including oils and fats. Toast them gently and they acquired a lovely sweetness. The only downside is that the nuts are so tiny it's hard to get them out. Maomao thought, but a simple matter of physical labor was not going to stop her when it came to her medicines. Xiaohong collected the pine cones. Maomao would immediately begin stripping them of their scales. Xiaohong seemed to enjoy collecting the pine cones, but she was less thrilled to see Maomao dissect her prizes. She tucked one particularly well-formed specimen, one she was especially happy with, into the folds of her robes. The middle-aged guard stayed close at hand. The other guard ate some food at the wagon and occasionally checked on Gyokujun, who was sleeping in the back. Maomao was just thinking that she needed to get the seeds out of her pile of pine cone scales when the middle-aged guard tugged on her sleeve. "Excuse me," he said. He had Xiaohong in his arms. "What's the matter?" The guard didn't say anything but glanced toward the wagon. "There was someone there, a man in his 30s. I'm a messenger. I was told to come and call you," the newcomer said. "Yeah, all right." The younger guard jumped down off the driver's bench and with a single, unstudied motion, lunged forward and slashed the messenger's throat. Maomao jumped. For a second she couldn't grasp what had happened. Beside her, the kindly guard had his hands over Xiaohong's eyes and mouth. "Into the forest," Maomao's escort said, and then he set off running, cradling Xiaohong. The younger guard grabbed the sleeping Gyokujun from the wagon and carried him, stuffing a cloth in the boy's mouth so he wouldn't bite his tongue or shout. These men knew what they were doing. Maomao realized why the guard had attacked the alleged messenger. She remembered what the Lady Byaroshi had said. "If everything looks all right, I'll come back to get you, so just wait here until I do." But it wasn't the Byaroshi who had come. It was someone claiming to be a messenger. This meant there had been trouble. Covered in an unpleasant sweat, Maomao had no choice but to follow the guard. They fled through the woods, stopping to hide each time they heard pursuers' footsteps behind them. The pursuit parties were never large and the two guards dealt with them. But how long could this go on? That hurts. The younger guard had sustained an injury to his arm. Someone among the most recent band of pursuers had gotten a slash in. Maomao daubed the wound with some coagulant herbs she had available and bandaged it. There didn't seem to be any nerve damage, but the man's reactions would be slowed. More importantly, they had no idea how many more people might be after them. They weren't sure if running would be enough to escape. In this game of cat and mouse, Maomao's group was at a disadvantage. They had two guards, but they also had two children who needed to be carried. Their pursuers nearly caught them again and again. Gyokujun was crying and didn't understand what was happening. Maomao didn't want him to start howling and get them all captured, so she kept the cloth in his mouth. Xiaohong was silent, but her whole body shook with fear. Her breath came hard and she was nearing her physical limit. They were as good as cornered. If Maomao, who was new to all this, realized that, then the two guards must be very well aware. "All right, listen," the kindly guard said to Maomao, his face grim. "There are too many of them. To be honest, this job isn't worth what we were paid anymore. We might be able to evade them a little longer, but as long as we stay in these woods, protecting the three of you is going to be impossible." Maomao didn't say anything. She knew the man was right. Even if they did leave the forest, they'd abandoned their wagon along with their horses. They had hardly any water or food. Getting back to the last town they'd visited would be a tall order. Yet neither could they return to the wagon. They certainly couldn't go into the new town nearby. This was not looking good. Again, to be honest, I think continuing to run would be pointless. I didn't become a Byaroshi because I'm some great fighter. You see me, it's my cowardice that's kept me alive. Maomao could understand that too. Those who knew how to evade danger made better guards than those who charged into the teeth of it. What I'm saying is we're leaving you here. We have failed in our mission. He was a bit too honest for his own good. Maomao could hardly have blamed him if he had run off and left them without explaining anything. She respected this more than him simply fleeing. After a moment she sighed. "All right," she said. "Just to be sure, would it do any good to say we will pay you extra?" The words crossed her mind, "I will pay any price." What a click! Maybe there was a thin ray of hope, a possibility that they could finagle horses somewhere. Perhaps the guards could lead Maomao and the kids out of this, but the men looked at each other and shook their heads. The younger one gestured at his wounded arm. The best possibility is that we could capture a couple of the wild horses who used the nearby watering hole. He and I could ride them, but could you ride an untamed horse without a saddle? I don't think we could ride two to a horse and still hope to escape the enemy. With my arm like this, I think I'll be lucky to be able to ride by myself. Maomao was quiet for a moment. She really wished she had learned how to ride a horse, but where there's life, there's hope. These two guards had proved themselves remarkably good-hearted. They didn't betray us and turn us over to our pursuers or steal the last of our money and leave us. They had sincerely tried to fulfill their duty. When they judged that wasn't possible, they told Maomao as much. You're still young and a woman, there's every chance they'll leave you alive even if they capture you. Maomao was quiet again. Alive, that was certain. There was no telling what they would do to her. Bandits weren't exactly renowned for their hospitality. But one thing was certain: if they captured these guards, they would kill them. I understand. But could you possibly take one person with you? One of the children? What do you mean? Asked the middle-aged guard, already getting ready to go. Maomao took out a bandage and tore a piece off. Xiaohong, what is your mother's name? Yingxing. Right, that was it. Maomao reflected that unlike her other siblings, it wasn't an animal-related name. Instead, it meant Silver Star. She wrote a short note on the bandage. Is it all right if I borrow this? Maomao asked Xiaohong, taking her hair decoration. Aha. Maomao wrapped the bandage around the hair ornament, then gave it to Gyokujin so that he had a cloth in his hands as well as his mouth. MMRF. Gyokujin seemed to want to say something, but Maomao ignored him. Could you possibly take just the young man back to the western capital? She asked. This kid? Alone? Yes. Maomao was, as they had said, a woman. Xiaohong was too, and lovely to boot. Gyokujin, however, was a young man and not smart enough to play the game when he had to. If they were caught, the first thing he would probably do was inform the pursuers of who his father was. There's no telling if Shikyo's name would work for them or against them. She considered the possibility that the bandits would keep them alive to ask for ransom, but then again, a lot of people seemed to have grudges against Shikyo. Hostages rarely made it home in one piece. Maomao determined that having Gyokujin with them would dramatically increase their chances of getting killed. She would have liked to give priority to the younger Xiaohong, but the situation forced her hand. Would it be too hard to take just the one child? Maomao felt in the folds of her robes, looking for something, anything to pay them with. She had a few small coins, but hardly more than pocket change. That left Arg. This is such a waste. I hate to do this. Agonized, she took out a small pouch. Inside were several pearls, imperfect, but pearls just the same. She'd intended to use them for medicinal purposes, but the situation again dictated their fate. Are these pearls? The guard asked. Yes, I assure you they're real. The two guards swallowed heavily. God, this is such a waste. There were enough pearls in that pouch Maomao had heard to buy a small house. Finally, she took the wad from Gyokujin's mouth. What the hell do you think you're doing? He demanded. Xiaohong and I are staying in this forest, she told him. You're going back to the western capital with these guards, and you're going to give Xiaohong's mother this. She pointed to the hair ornament. What? Am I going by myself? That's it, time's up. Maomao shoved the cloth back in Gyokujin's mouth, then bound his hands and feet so he wouldn't be able to fight. The middle-aged guard hefted the thrashing Gyokujin onto his back and secured him with a rope tied fast around them both, as though Gyokujin were riding piggyback. I'm sorry about this, the guard said, and then he and his companion left Maomao and Xiaohong in the woods. Xiaohong clung to Maomao and mournfully watched them go. She was smart enough to understand that the guards and Gyokujin had left them there. Sorry, maybe I should have asked you, Maomao said. Is this the best way? Xiaohong asked. I hope so. All right then. Dallying would get them nowhere. Action was everything. Maomao looked around. She saw no sign of anyone, but their pursuers would be there soon enough. Very well, she found a large tree and dug into the ground, making a small hole. They climbed in and covered themselves with leaves. We are hiding, Xiaohong asked. For the moment, yes, but what if they find us? It is only a matter of time until they do. Maybe they could avoid being found. A short while later they heard footsteps charging past. Everyone Maomao could see was armed. Some carried swords, but others had farming implements. There were two possible outcomes. They could kill them to shut them up or take them as hostages. Maomao didn't know which way it would go. She also didn't know how they would be treated if they were taken. Sorry about this, Maomao whispered to Xiaohong. Then she balled up the sleeve of her outfit and stuffed it into Xiaohong's mouth. One set of footsteps approached. Maomao stole a glance out of the corner of her eye. Not him. She could feel Xiaohong's heart pounding as she held her. The girl could probably sense Maomao's heart racing the same way. Although it was deep into autumn and the air was getting cold, Maomao felt inordinately warm. She almost worried steam would rise from her and give them away, not him either. Each time a bandit approached, Maomao held her breath, but she let them go past one by one. Their pursuers were being careless. Maomao and Xiaohong had been accompanied by a pair of guards until a few minutes ago. Most likely nobody suspected the two girls might be hiding nearby. Not yet. Wait for it. Maomao waited and waited. Finally a man with a curved blade approached. He had thick facial and body hair. What was on his head was unkempt, and he had a filthy cloak wrapped around his shoulders. Maomao took him to be in his 50s. Something hung from his neck. This one, he's the guy. Maomao didn't know if they were going to find anyone who was a better bet. Even though she had no idea who he was or what he was like, she would have to try her luck. Just as the man was about to pass them by, Maomao stood up. "Hey, you're the man," said. Maomao kept her mouth tight shut. The man pressed his curved blade against her neck. Stay calm. Stay calm." She felt like her blood had slowed down, but she opened her mouth. "Oh Lord, do you see us?" she said. These were the words Chu had taught her from the foreign scriptures. Maomao was careful to enunciate clearly, bent on not tripping over her own tongue. Then she looked straight at the man. You could even call it a glare. Her pulse skyrocketed and she thought her knees might start shaking, but she couldn't let him see that. To sell this bluff she would have to be as imperious as she possibly could. There was a beat, but at length the man muttered, "Oh, come on," and let the sword drop. He sounded disappointed. Does this mean my gamble paid off? Maomao felt like she might collapse on the spot, but she had to keep up the act. If they'd been non-believers, we could have just offed them. The man grumbled. That was close. Much, much too close. Maomao took another look at the necklace dangling around the man's neck. It was a simple thing, just a scrap of wood hanging from a leather strap. The piece of wood bore the same design Maomao had seen on the holy book she read to pass the time. It was the same book whose teachings were propounded at the church in the town nearby. Chapter 18, The Bandits' Hideout. The town of Faith was remarkably quiet. There were shops packed around the big religious building, but they were all closed. Instead, filthy men loitered in the streets. They did not look like villagers. They were obviously bandits. The middle-aged man, the one so full of faith that he had spared Maomao and Xiaohong, now led them along as prisoners. Other bandits sized them up as they went past, but they quickly looked away again when the older man glared at them. It was clear that the outlaws ran this town. These were not men of gainful employment or productive labor. They were feeding off this town, and when there was nothing left to feed on, they would move on to the next place. Like locusts, Maomao thought, forcing down the bile that rose in her throat. She was relieved to discover that if nothing else, her judgment had been correct. The middle-aged man had been the right person to engage with. He was a believer in the church here, and his status was at least somewhat secure. She had guessed at his faith from his necklace. As for his status, his outfit had given her an inkling. He wore a dirty cloak, hardly a valuable item, but valuable enough from a bandit's perspective. The blade of his weapon had been carefully honed, and even his cloak was made with sturdy pelt. It wasn't going to fall to tatters if he took a modest sword stroke. In the rough and tumble world of bandits, physical prowess translated directly into authority. Maomao guessed that a man's accoutrements would convey his place in the gang's hierarchy. Her efforts had earned her a bloody neck, courtesy of that finely honed blade. It wasn't too bloody, so it quickly dried, but it distressed Xiaohong, since blood always looks like there's more than there is. I'm lucky this kid is so docile, Maomao thought, but Xiaohong had a habit of eating her own hair when she was anxious. Some people ate foreign objects when under stress. She probably had a variety of that condition. In here, the man said, leading them into the church at the center of town. What did they call this faith again? Something-ism. She asked Chu the name of it, but it had been difficult to pronounce, and Maomao didn't remember it very well. A man about 30 years old reclined in the middle of the church's worship hall. It was a ballsy place to set yourself up. He was missing an eye from some kind of injury, and he looked like the kind of guy who would lose an eye in a fight. He was dressed like a member of one of the foreign tribes, with a fox pelt draped over a sleeveless shirt. The bandits had proved terrible guests in this house of prayer. The man had set out several pelts to lie on, and the hall was littered with empty bottles and scraps of meat. 2 terrified women waited nearby to do the man's bidding. I brought a couple more, boss, the middle-aged man said. Their boss is surprisingly young. Maomao had been expecting someone older. She observed the younger man's physique, realizing he had perhaps reached the top of the food chain through brute force. Them too, the man asked. Yes, sir. Who was he calling them to? Huh, I think we can do without the tag-along. There was a moment before the older man said, you said you would spare fellow believers. We could at least put her to work in the kitchen, don't you think? Tag-along, spare me. Maomao was starting to think her assumptions about the situation had been a bit off. It almost sounded like they hadn't been after Maomao at all. But if not me, then her gaze turned to Xiaohong. The boss heaved himself to his feet. He was built like a bear and towered over Xiaohong. Tears leaped to the young girl's eyes as she hid behind Maomao. Hey, the leader barked. Yes, one of the women asked, flinching. Where's that wanted poster? Slowly, hesitantly, the woman handed him a piece of parchment. The boss unrolled the paper and looked from Xiaohong to the paper and back. It kind of looks like her, I guess. Did they have a portrait? The paper showed a child's face and included a written description of the subject's most distinctive characteristics. Maomao recognized the person in the picture. Could that be? It looked remarkably like the pampered young foreign woman Maomao had treated the other day. All right, fair enough. She took another look at Xiaohong. The girl did indeed have light hair. From a distance it wouldn't be hard to take her for a foreigner. Her eyes weren't blue, but you wouldn't notice that unless you were up close. But they're hardly the same age. Xiaohong was 7 or 8 years old at best. She couldn't have passed for 10 if she tried, whereas the girl with the bad tooth must have been at least 12 or 13. But then, foreigners tend to look older. Maybe she had actually been around 10. No, I don't think so. Foreigners didn't count their age the way people in Maomao's country did, where everyone got a year older on the first of the year. They counted from the day someone was actually born, so a person turned 1 year old exactly 1 year after their birth. By that logic, someone might take Xiaohong for 10. Maybe somebody spotted Gyokujin with us, and some information about him got mixed into the report. Maomao took another look at the likeness, which was accompanied by a description. Light golden hair, blue eyes, about 10 years old. Again, Xiaohong did not have blue eyes, so one might think that would make it obvious she was a different person, but the boss had not noticed. Maybe he cannot read. The poster listed one other notable feature, may be disguised as a boy. Now Maomao understood why she and Xiaohong had been captured. Forget it. It is supposed to be a boy, isn't it? Well, one way to be sure, strip her. The boss tried to grab Xiaohong's hand. Maomao stepped between them. Wazzies, the hulking man said, annoyed. Maomao swallowed hard and barely managed not to flinch back. Yes, she had made the right call. This could have been a much more volatile situation with Gyokujin present. You needn't trouble yourself, she said. This child is a girl. I will help her undress, so please stay your hand. Maomao urged Xiaohong forward again. It should have been fairly obvious whether she was a boy or a girl. This will just take a second, Maomao whispered to Xiaohong, who looked on the verge of tears. Then Maomao began to roll up her skirt. Once the boss saw she was a girl, he could be done with them. It was at that moment that one of the women attending the boss stepped forward. Master One-Eyed Dragon, please let me check the child. He grunted. All right. What do I want with some naked kid anyway? One-Eyed Dragon, so that was what the boss here went by. One-Eyed Dragon, awfully big name he had there, Maomao thought. It was the kind of name a great warrior would have had generations ago. The woman came over to them and felt at Xiaohong's skirt, weeping the whole while. I'm sorry, sweetheart, she said. Xiaohong didn't say anything. The woman was trying to spare this poor child as much embarrassment as she could. When she had confirmed that there was nothing extra between Xiaohong's legs, she turned to One-Eyed Dragon with a look of relief. She's a girl, the woman reported. Is she now? Which jackass told me we should take a look at the next wagon coming through? Our man on the inside in the next town. All right. 100 lashes, no food for 3 days. Yes, sir, the middle-aged man quietly went about his work. Damn it. Here I thought I could finally get Shikyo by the short hairs. One-Eyed Dragon stamped on the ground like a child throwing a tantrum. He was so big he made the floor shake. Did he just say Shikyo? Maomao stayed in front of Xiaohong, covering her. The girl was shaken to hear her uncle's name, and the last thing Maomao wanted was for One-Eyed Dragon to realize he was in possession of one of Shikyo's relatives. No telling what he would do to her. What Maomao had seen on that wanted poster made it clear that the foreign noble girl that the foreign punk with the bad tooth had caused some kind of quarrel. The kid had looked awfully sheltered. It turned out he was quite important. My fleeing must have been to spare Jinchi some kind of trouble. Whatever the reason, that kid and his tooth were a political key. What should we do with this pair? The middle-aged man asked One-Eyed Dragon, "Whatever you want, I don't care." One-Eyed Dragon had lost all interest in them, or maybe he was pouting. Whichever it was, he curled up on his pelt bed like a bear or a tiger settling in for a nap. "You," the middle-aged man snapped at the woman who had apologized to Zyrohong. "You take them. They're fellow believers." "Yes, sir," the woman bowed. She was afraid of One-Eyed Dragon, but she seemed to have some respect for this man. This way she said to Maomao and Zyrohong, and they had little choice but to follow her. Chapter 19, The Bandit Village Part 1. Maomao and Zyrohong were led to a room full of women and children. The bedrolls and pillows that lined the walls indicated that they all slept here together.